Hey everybody, it's Leroy of Leroy Gaming, and in today's Pathfinder Path of the Righteous video, I'm going to specifically be going over all of the unique Crusade units for the Devil Path. We're going to be looking at their stats, seeing what they look like, what they move like, how they attack. I'm also going to be providing you feedback later on in the video as far as my personal opinion, as far as what the best options and choices are overall after evaluating all the units. Now, if you want an in-depth guide on how to get all these, as well as everything to do with the Devil Path, then make sure to check out my Ultimate Guide to the Devil. I'll make sure to link that above. But this video in particular is just going to be focusing on your unit options. So with that being said, remember guys, if you want to support me in this channel, help me make more of these videos, make sure to like, subscribe, and most importantly, leave a comment. Let me know what you like, what kind of videos you would like for me to make. That really greatly helps the algorithm and small channels like mine. All right, guys, with that being said, let's go ahead and jump right in and take a look at all the Crusade units for the Devil Mythic Path. Alright, I'm actually going to begin this video with what I will kind of call the three mainstay unit options that you're going to have access to. And those are going to be the Infernal Archers, we're going to be looking at the Infernal Infantry, and the Infernal Cavalry. Now, the reason I say mainstay is that these units, you're going to basically get a foundational amount of all of these during the campaign, but one of these you're going to get to choose as a unit that will replace your recruitable units, meaning you're going to have much easier kind of options to get a lot of them throughout the campaign. For all the other ones, if you want to get more of them, you're going to have to use the Call to Arms ability. And again, I'll show how that works for those of you that don't know a little bit later in the video. But that's the main thing to note here. Now, the very first unit we're going to take a look at is the Infernal Archer. So let's take a look at their stat lines. Now, these are mythic units. These key tags are important to note because sometimes you'll get buffs to mythic units or recruitable units, etc., even though you may be able to recruit them. Now, they actually, for an archer, have insanely high AC. 29 AC is nuts for an actual archer range unit. Their health is respectable at 117. But really what's amazing about them is they did 56 to 63 damage. That is absolutely insane. That is in line with the marksmen, except that they're going to have the survivability and sustainability of a ranger basically on steroids, because these guys, this AC is just bonkers high. Now, they also have a feature called Penalty in Close Combat. So this unit switches to melee weapons in melee combat and deals 50% damage. This is important. Some units, some range units do not do this. So what this really means is that while this can take a hit, honestly, you want to keep them at range just like you would have a marksman. You just get the benefit that they're not nearly as squishy at the marksman. Their EXP is 120. This is important because you technically want this to be lower if you can, because this allows you to summon more of them with the Call to Arms ability. Now, in this initial playthrough, I hadn't chosen them as my primary, which may have been potentially a mistake. I'll discuss that a little bit later. But this is a unit, and kind of let's see what their animation is like when they attack. And again, even with only 64 of them, they're already doing 5,500 damage, and quite lethal there. Now, the second unit we're going to take a look at is going to be the Infernal Cavalry. Now, these guys, again, very tanky. They are technically considered a spellcasting unit. Now, why is this important? This is important because there are some abilities you may get that basically will allow you to get buffs to units that are magical. And by that I mean abilities like this, Magic Instructor 1. It says all spellcasting units have a +2 bonus to AC and damage per level of this feat. So even though that cavalry may not initially seem like a spellcaster because it actually doesn't have any spells, it does benefit from this, and this is really nice, especially if you can stack this numerous times. So I probably here already have this included. So I get 38 AC, which is again a bonkers levels of AC, especially for cavalry. So I'm assuming this would be 36 to have that ability. 324 health, which is very respectable. It doesn't have insane damage, 17 to 24, but it's also not horrible. With that being said, there are two really nice benefits for these. Their experience is 103, which is actually pretty low, so you can summon them, a good amount of them with call to action. And this growth is because I had chosen them for my recruitable units. This is how I was able to get 242 of them. So they grow at 17 units per week before any other. And this is based on my personal modifiers as well. Now, the two abilities you're going to have is Smite Chaos. Unit has a bonus to attack, damage, and AC equal to its charisma against chaotic units. That is really, really nice because, as we know, we're fighting a lot of chaotic units in this game. So in this case, we have 10. So what this means, I'm assuming, because it doesn't specify whether it's, a plus bonus, which would be horrible because 10 is like a +0. But if this is exactly as it sounds like, then against chaotic units, you should basically do an extra 10 damage per unit. So 27 to 34 damage per unit. The AC is going to also be much higher, so 38 in this case. And they're going to hit very, very consistently. So this is really, really good against some of those top-end demons you're going to be fighting. And then you have Hell Tyranny. The unit's attack applies a -5% penalty to maximum hit points. So this is really, really good if you're fighting against really tough, like epic singular monsters. So again, absolutely devastating cavalry as far as their effectiveness. And again, let's take a look. Their movement, again, is really, really far. I believe it was 6 base, yeah. So it can move across the entire map. And again, it's okay. But again, has that nice debuff, and it's quite effective. Now, next we're going to take a look at the Infernal Infantry, and you're going to get some of these really, really early on, and then you're also going to have, obviously, the option to pick them as your main recruitable. So, what are the strengths and weaknesses to these? So, one of the strengths to them is that they have also amazing AC, 39 base AC. Remember, I had that extra +2 bonus on the cavalry. So those really had 36. So they have more AC than a cavalry. They have more health at 392. They do less damage though, 3 to 10. And they don't have that special ability. They also only move 3. The one benefit here is that they have slightly less XP, but not by much. So unfortunately, you're not going to be able to use them in relation to call to arms nearly as effectively. So they, in my personal opinion, are kind of a weaker version of the Infernal Cavalry across the board, especially if you have a general that can get this trait that I mentioned that allows you, the Magic Instructor, that gives you bonuses per level to magical units. Because again, these unfortunately are not magical units. Let's go ahead though, take a look what they move like and attack. There we go, proc the double attack. And again, we don't have as many of them, 85, but they also do baseline less damage. So, unfortunately, a bit of an underwhelming unit. Alright, next we're going to take a look at another great unit. These are the Erinyes. I cannot pronounce that. But these are excellent, excellent ranged units. They also have flight, which is really nice. They have 83 health, so they unfortunately aren't quite as tanky as the Infernal Archers. They only have 20 AC versus the Infernal Archers 33 AC. Or I believe it's 30. It may have been buffed by the total defense. But they do very, very good damage as well, 55 to 62. However, they have some great abilities And also, they're pretty dirt cheap. They're only 80 EXP. The Infernal Archers are actually 120. So these are cheaper than what you would think would be the more special. They're basically cheaper than the Infernal Archers. And I would have guessed that the Erinyes would have been a little bit more special. Now, they still have the penalty for close combat. And they have flight. But what I really like about them is they have Entangling Strike. The unit's attacks reduces the target speed to 0 for 2 rounds. So if you have a lot of range units, which you can very easily do with a Devil build, and the enemy has melee units that like to rush you, well, you can root them, at least one of them at a time, potentially 2, and keep them at range and take them out. So really, really good candidates for using to call to arms. It's very easy to get a ton of them. And again, 52 or 55 to 62 base damage is a lot. Let me see if we can get that entanglement to proc. Actually, this may just kill them all. We'll see. Yeah, like I said, absolutely deadly. Very, very easy to get a bunch of them. All right, next we're going to go ahead and take a look at the Sisters of the Golden Erinyes. Now, these are technically off of an event that you can also get if you're an Aeon. So they're not officially exclusive to the Devil, but I thought I would cover them because they are basically, they're lawful evil. They are battle clerics, battle monks, whatever you want to call them. Oh yeah, battle monks that worship Asmodeus, which is basically the Devil. And their stat lines, especially defensively, is quite nutter butter. So 598 health, which is a ton. 32 AC, including damage reduction. 3, which is really, really nice. Their melee damage is respectable, 24 to 26. They are kind of expensive, though, at 230. But with that being said, a combination of high AC and high health makes them pretty good. And again, you can get them rather early on. I believe you get them in Act 3. So they are pretty good. Again, they're not going to be as good as the Cavalry, which are kind of like the VIPs as far as mobility, tankage, and potential, at least, tanking DPS. But one for one, they do more damage by just a little bit. So let's take a quick look at what they look like and how they attack. And here's going to be her attack. Again, nothing crazy to write home about, but again, kind of a standard monkey strike. But they can be a very respectable frontline character. Alright, now, I also want to cover the battle slaves. You will have an option as one of the Chilaxian events to choose between battle slaves or upgrading your Infernal Forges. Now, I chose to upgrade the Infernal Forges, which is one of the unique units that the Devil gets. And again, do check out my total guide to the Devil Mythic Path for those details. But if you chose to have the unit option, this is what they're going to be like. So they are Mythic units. They have 44 health, which is not much. They have really, really bad AC, 16. Don't mind a negative 13 morale. I'm in a battle where the enemy's providing a huge debuff to that. But interestingly enough, they do a lot of damage. They basically hit really hard. They're basically glass cannons, and they're not too expensive. So they do 25 to 34 damage, and they're stubborn. So unit gains a stacking plus 2 bonus to attack when damaged. So if you stack a lot of them using call to arms, this could be a cheap glass cannon unit. But again, at 44 health, this could be rough. So it's kind of up to you if you want to use them. They're kind of hilarious. Take a look at them. They're like little, I don't know if they're gnomes or whatever, or halflings. But they have this giant ball and chain, and they have a pretty cool attack animation. So they just swing, big ol' swing and attack, and that looks like it would absolutely smash them by accident. So those are the battle slaves as an option for you. Alright, and finally we're going to take a look at the Grand Tier units for the Devil. We will go ahead and start with the Executioner Devils. So the Executioner Devil, it gets 30 AC baseline and 447 health, which is nice and tanky, even though the AC could be higher. Some of the baseline units, like the Cavalry, for example, are going to have quite a bit higher AC. But this is definitely, well, it's not a glass cannon, it's definitely an offensive powerhouse. Its damage per hit is just about the highest I've seen. 178 to 189, which is nuts. And they also have a really cool ability that could be quite effective. It's called Lust for Battle. So the unit can make an additional action after destroying an enemy unit. So, effectively, if you kill a unit and you're next to 2 units, you could potentially double the attack, getting double the amount of damage out of them. So, situational again, but potentially really good. Combined with Flight, which allows you with your movement, and again, movement is only 3, which is unfortunate, but allows you to fly through your units as long as you don't end on them, as well as parts of the terrain as well. So you could, in theory, fly over this because you could go 1, 2, and as long as you end on the other side, you could do something like that. So that is quite effective. Now, the biggest problem this unit has is it's extremely expensive. So if you choose them over the Cleric, you're gonna be able to use a decree that is going to allow you to get 1 of them every time you use them. It takes 2 days to cast. It's a 5-day cooldown. So it takes a long time to get them. Now, you can use the ability to summon extra units, and I'll show that in a second when we go over the Cleric example. Unfortunately, every time you cast that, and remember, you can only use that every 2 weeks, or 15 days roughly, it will only give you 2. So this is what you see here. You use Call to Arms being used once, plus the initial summon gives you 3 of them. While some of these other units, like for example the Infernal Cavalry that are pretty effective, they're going to cost you a little bit over 100. So these cost 23 times more than a Cavalry. Now you may notice that the Cavalry does basically 1/10 the damage of the Executioner Devils, roughly. So why is this important? Well, because they cost, if you were to equate it, basically the Devils, Executioner Devils, cost 20 times more, but only do 10 times more damage. So, or a little less than that, because notice the Infernal Cavalry do 17 to 24. So as far as a trade-off ratio, the Cavalry are much, much more effective than the Devils. If you were to get the Lust for Battle off, you could get an equivalent damage potentially, but remember, you have less AC, your movement is way worse because it's only 3 versus 6, and these have almost as much health, 324 versus 447. So these look cool, and as you'll see here, I'll kind of move up and try and attacking with them for you, but they are not a very good trade-off point-wise and value-wise. So here's a cool execution motion, and again, if you were to get a ton of them, you would get some really big numbers, but they're not very cost-effective. Okay, so the final unit we're going to take a look at is the alternative to the Executioner, which is the Asmodean Clerics. But I also want to use the opportunity to review with you how to effectively utilize Call to Arms. So what I've done here is I've summoned my 1 Asmodean Cleric, and again, unfortunately, you're only going to get 1 every 2 days with a 5-day cooldown, and I've separated it from the army. Now, why is this important? This is important because if you look at the description for Call to Arms, it says, adds units to the target army with a total value of 750 times Mythic rank, and that 750 is basically relating to the EXP of the units. So some of these units, like this one that costs 1450, basically is the equivalent of 2, so you should get roughly 1 of these for every 2 mythic levels you have. So that's important to note. But notice the wording, it says the unit type is chosen randomly from the units that are already present in the army. So if you were to put that unit in this army, you'd only have a 1 in 6 chance of getting any of those. And if you're trying to min-max a specific unit, what you're going to want to do is separate the unit from the army. If you don't know how to do that, select your army, hit the little eye in the lower right hand corner, and literally hit these little 2 arrows here to split. Move them to the side like this, exit out, and notice now they're separate. But again, we're going to do this with the new Cleric. Then move them away from the other army or cities because it's hard to target this otherwise. and then cast this, the ability called Arms. And there you go, we got 4 more. And again, you can only do this once every 15 days, but considering you only get 1 of them every 7 days, basically, this, even at Mythic 8, is going to double the rate of being able to get this. And at this point, you can go ahead and just add them back into your army. Now let's go ahead and take a look at what they look like and how they function in combat. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look at the Asmodean Clerics. And don't mind that she looks a little off here because she actually has a debuff that was cast on her by Nalphas Ni, or whatever his name is. But stat-wise, she actually has a base of 30 AC, just like the Executioner, and 427 hit points. But what makes her special here is she's a spellcasting unit, even though she's quite hardy, relatively speaking, and does decent melee damage for a cleric. As a reminder, the reason spellcasting unit is important for this is it allows you to benefit from this very particular feat, Magic Instructor, that gives per tier of this +2 AC and damage per level of the feat. So similar to the Infernal Cavalry, there's a benefit to having these if you have a caster general and pick up that feat, and especially if you get it more than once. Now, there's a couple of things I really like about this unit compared to the Executioner. So number one is it costs about 1,000 less EXP, meaning you can get more of them. So we were able to summon 4 of these instead of 3. So we're basically, or 2. So instead of having 3 of them, right off the bat you can have 5 of them, and they're going to scale more quickly. Additionally, she has 3 spells that are not impacted by how many units you have. The first is Dispel, and so Dispel is going to get rid of any negative effects, so we can kind of use this on ourselves. And as you see here, we cleanse her, now she's all pretty and clean. So that's a nice use of that. And additionally, she has 2 more abilities. Dominate, which is quite interesting. Basically, you can target unit anywhere on the map, and I'm going to show this in just a second. And the target unit attacks its allies for 2 rounds. It's a mind-affecting effect. Now, unfortunately, difficulty class is 10. I don't know how effective that's going to be compared to these units, but we're going to go ahead and try it out right now so you can kind of see what it's like. We'll put on this big baddie. So unfortunately, in our case, they teleported away and it didn't seem to have worked. So that is a bit of a problem. Obviously, if you can get this to proc, it can be helpful. And then finally, you have Not a Step Back, which again is a positive buff. And it's going to target another unit, give it +4 bonus to attack, which again means it's more likely to roll its damage successfully against the enemy. So this is going to be more useful when you have giant stacked units, like you see here with some of my melee units or ranged units. But it's going to make it so they get -2 to their movement, to their speed. So it, as the name implies, just makes it that you're supposed to just stay in there and fight. It's going to be pretty big nerf for something that only moves 3, but against like an Infernal Cavalry it could be still quite effective. So I'll show that off in a second. Let's go and take a look at the melee animation movement as well here. Kind of like a basic attack. Again, she's not going to do crazy damage, especially when you don't have a lot of them. But she is, well, I was about to say she's quite tanky. Well, she's tanky as long as she doesn't get nuked by 76, you know, ranged caster units. So those are the options here for you. Now, let's go ahead and take a look and get my overall feedback on what choices are best. Alright, so what are my final opinions on the Devil Army? Well, when it comes to the Devil Army, I actually have very clear runaway recommendations for you. And there's going to be one alternative option depending on who your main general is. So, my first recommendation is ignore the Grand Tier units. Both the Executioner, whose stats are kind of underwhelming, as well as the Cleric, whose spells, especially the offensive spells, don't seem to be that balanced. The DC check on it seems to be too low. It's not worth trying to stack those. It takes too long, and they don't have any unique payoff. Plus, you know, when it comes from a cosmetic look, the Executioners look pretty cool, but the Clerics are kind of ho-hum. With that being said, the other units are amazing. Now, when it comes to picking between the Infernal Infantry, Infernal Archers, and Infernal Cavalry, I will tell you that if you have a Caster General with Magic Instructor 1 or higher, then go with the Cavalry. Easy peasy. It's going to be super tanky. It's going to do decent damage. It's going to have Smite Chaos. EXP is not bad at all. And you can, of course, grow them 14 a week, which is not bad. You can even stack them up very easily by using Call to Arms and recruiting them to get very beefy stacks. Again, they can run across the whole map and just wreck things. Now, if you don't have either a caster or a caster of Magic Instructor, you may want to consider Infernal Archers, because they are basically marksmen on crack. And basically, the Devil Path allows you to get what I will call the ultimate stack for just ranged kill power. So what you would do to get this is you would choose Infernal Archers so you can recruit them. And they're going to be just beefier versions of the marksmen. And then on top of that, you would have your Erinyes that you can basically decree every week or so. But then I would use my Call to Arms on them. So you would have two distinct units that both do, you know, 55 to 60 plus damage per attack. Also, the Erinyes do the entangling strikes, which are amazing. Every round between these two, you could just wreck things. I could see it being very easy to get hundreds of both of them. And then you can use your other units as frontline fighters. Also, don't forget, you can recruit the Rangers, which are also respectable ranged units from the mercenary pool. So you could have 3 ranged units that could do a really good job of wrecking things. Now again, unfortunately, the marksmen can't be part of this because your Infernal Archers replace them, but these are better than the marksmen in every which way. So again, those are my recommendations. Definitely stay far away from Infernal Infantry. Sisters of Golden Erinyes are fine, but nothing to write home about. And again, Battle Slaves, I wouldn't pick them. I would pick the Infernal upgrade. So those are my recommendations for the Devil units. Let me know your thoughts. Do you agree with my assessments of the various Crusade units for the Devil Path? Or do you have other opinions? We'd love to hear from you. And as always, guys, if you like these videos, if you want to see more of them and more coverage of Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous, make sure to like, subscribe, slam that notification bell, and most importantly, drop a comment. Let me know your thoughts and what you would like to see more of. With that being said, guys, thank you again for all the support, and I will see you guys in the next video.